Coming up this week on the show, James Brennan's back. You may remember him a few weeks ago when he talked about the Polyvoks. Well, he's back with his Octave Cat, and we'll be talking about the history of the Octave Cat, and he'll give us a demonstration of the synth as well. So I think you're going to enjoy this. It's a really nice Duophonic synth from analog synth from the sort of late 70s, early 80s. It's got a really nice sound as well. So James is going to give us a bit of explanation about it and some of the sounds as well. So I think you'll enjoy this. James, welcome back to the show.
How you doing, Ian? Good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. Last time you talked a load of Polyvoks, and
yeah,
I'm not being
see
rude.
What you did there.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I've been working on that one for a while. Yeah, and that was we had a great response to that, and I wanted to get you back on the show and talk about another classic synth in a minute. But before we do that, actually, I think did you you reached out to the creator, didn't you, the Polyvoks, and got a bit, or the guy that sold you his Polyvoks?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so as I said, it was a guy called Artemy Pavlov, and he is the owner of a company called Sine that now create digital effects for hardware synthesizers. And in my last video, I'd mentioned the kind of the Dreadbox gear and how they were like incorporating into that. And basically, you know, because we'd recorded the video, I just linked him to the video and just said, you know, just to let you know, your Polyvox is still alive and well, you know, and you might want to see this. And then obviously I forwarded you the response, you know, but it was an interesting little tidbit when he said that it was actually owned by a priest at a church before he acquired it, which is a really odd thing.
Yeah. I can't quite imagine that sound, those sort of raw sounds coming from the Polyvox in a church.
I'm assuming he had it in the house. I don't think he actually brought it out. Oh, I mean, you never know.
You never know.
I doubt he actually brought it into the church, you know. But you know, I mean, you could try and shoehorn it in a sermon somewhere, I suppose.
It would sound probably quite good with a big pipe organ machine playing the bass notes and the I could. I guess gothic synth music.
Yeah, you could play like a wee solo over it, I suppose. You
know?
You play a wee lead over your organ. But yeah, no, he was obviously quite pleased, you know, because he said in it, obviously, he'd been kind of thinking about, you know, like, oh, when, you know, I'd sold it a while ago, I wonder if, you know, what kind of happened to it, you know, so it crossed his mind a few times, he said in the response. So yeah, and what he did mention as well is there's a new synth coming out, is the Artemis, which has got their effects in it as well. I think it might be the Nymphes, but just with more features and another oscillator. So I think it's a kind of step up from that. So I've mentioned that in the last video. You know, I'd really like the Dreadbox stuff, so it's maybe worth checking out if people have been looking into that, just to see that's the kind of the newest thing that they're coming out with.
And so, what is the synth that you're going to be talking about tonight?
All right, so tonight we're going to be featuring a synthesizer called the Octave. Well, it's either Octave Cat or Octave the Cat. I think it's just Octave Cat, but on the badge it says the Cat. So Octave Cat, which is a monophonic, fully analog synthesizer that I think the first one that was, well, I think they initially came out, was it 1976, I want to say. And it was manufactured for maybe 2 or 3 years and had a couple of revisions.
Yeah, and it's synth that I remember reading about in Key Facts, the synth book that I had. You know, I used to go through it and look at all these great analog synths, and that was always in there, but it was always a bit of a strange one. So where are they originally from? What country were they from?
They were American,
right?
I believe. Yeah. So it was a company called I think it was Octave Electronics, and then it became Octave Plateau because I think they merged with another company. I probably should have done a bit more research about this. Hang on, I've got it up here. So Octave Plateau Electronics, So it was originally founded as Octave Electronics by a guy called Carmine Bonanno, and the first product was actually the Cat. So this was their very first product, and it was this says here in the wiki that it's similar to the ARP Odyssey, and yeah, there are some similarities, but I wouldn't say it's like a direct clone, but it definitely was inspired by the Odyssey, and yeah, so I think they merged, as I said, with another company and became Octave Plateau. And then I think you'd mentioned just before we started the video that they then went on to become Turtle Beach.
Yeah,
Voyetra Turtle Beach, I think.
Yeah,
Who are obviously an electronics company that they make audio gear now, and predominantly like headsets and sound cards and things like
sound
that.
Cards,
for the computer industry, yeah.
Yeah, and the PC sort of as the PC became was getting popular with for media stuff, games and everything else. I remember that being a standard. So when you installed your game, you could choose your sound card, and that was one. I never had one, but I always remember the name being there, and I think it was quite a popular one, especially in the States. So it's interesting to see how they went from analog synth up to PC sound cards.
They kind of just pivoted, just a kind of sign of the times, I guess.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So they've not produced that many synthesizers. So there was the Octave Cat, and then later on there was the Octave Kitten, which was a kind of stripped down version of the Octave Cat. But they also had one called the Voyetra 8, which I think was a very, very ambitious synth for the time.
Rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah. So I've got here 1979. Yeah, so they merged with Plateau Electronics in 1979, and then at that point, that was when they started looking into creating the Voyetra 8, which was an 8-voice polyphonic synth. It was on a rack mount, but I think it had a lot of like quite advanced features for the time. Yes, it says here that it had a software editor that ran in DOS and an IBM PC. So I mean that's back in what. I mean, well, that probably would have been into the early 80s at that point, I would imagine. Yeah. But yeah, the fact that you could, I mean, that was unheard of at the time. That that you would actually control a synthesizer using a computer of that era. But I think it didn't sell very well because due to the expense. So it says here £6,000 in 1983, and it was obviously in that point it was directly competing with the Yamaha DX7. So, let's see. They developed something called Sequencer Plus as well, which was the first successful MIDI sequencer for the IBM PC platform. So you could kind of see maybe the beginnings of the move towards obviously computer stuff from that there. And it looks like they were acquired by Turtle Beach in 1996 and became Voyetra Turtle Beach was the full name. Yeah, so that's kind of a brief history there. They also had another thing called the Cat Stick as well, which was like a kind of controller for the Octave Cat and Kitten. So it was basically it sent like control voltages and allowed you to control all different things, and it was like almost like a little joystick, and you could move it in two different directions to do different things. So, but they're quite rare apparently.
Yeah. So you've got one of these. So when did you get that?
Oh, right. So I didn't really look back at this. I mean, I've got an interesting story about how I acquired it, I suppose. But it probably would have been. So if the Polyvoks was it about 2006? I'm going to assume this was probably maybe 2005, 2000. Yeah, it's probably 2005, I would say. Yeah, because I think it was when I was just kind of in my early years of uni. Again, I'd kind of fallen down the rabbit hole, and I'd seen one advertised for what I thought was a pretty good price at the time. So I contacted the seller, and it was. I'm going to be honest, it was a bit of hassle trying to arrange the sale because the guy was really reluctant to package it up, and he stayed down in Scunthorpe, and there was a lot of kind of slow communication back and forth, but eventually we managed to work out a deal. I think he dropped it off at a place thing called Parcelbox, who were willing to box it up, and I paid for that, and for the shipping and everything, and and then when it arrived, everything worked, but it was like severely in need of a calibration. So I kind of got started with that. And I was talking about how the Polyvoks is quite a good design. You lift the panel and then you've got access to the the trim pots. The Octave Cat's similar in the sense that it's got all the trim pots are accessible through holes in the front panel. but they've got little rubber stoppers that kind of cover them. And to get the rubber stoppers off, you need to basically go into the synthesizer, take out the main circuit board, and get them from the inside. You've got to kind of push them out. Now that's not usually a problem. I mean, it's just four screws in the bottom, a few screws in the motherboard, out it comes, away you go. But the issue I had was just no matter what I did, I could not get the knobs off of the Cat. It was like they would not pull off, So at the time I went online and I'm like, how do you get these off? And people are like, oh yeah, they should just pull off. And I don't know if it was that the guy I bought it off of or a previous owner, but it looked like they'd actually been glued onto the spindles.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so because I couldn't remove the knobs, I couldn't basically take the board out because obviously I needed to get the spindles through the panel. So my only option was to try and take it to, it was some sort of machine specialist I found in Glasgow, which is like my local big city, and he was able to remove the knobs, but he had to destroy them in the process, which was really unfortunate. So I don't have the original knobs, and he replaced them with mini Moog style knobs, and I think that's because there is a revision of the Cat that does have mini Moog style knobs. So maybe he just looked online and seen a picture of one and thought, oh, I can source those. So effectively, mine's has got mini Moog knobs, which is the only part of it that's not really original. And that was a shame that I lost the stock. It's not completely stock, but once that I managed to get the board out and calibrate it, obviously I was able to play it, so it was definitely worth doing. Since then, I mean, it's been well looked after, and it's I've not had any issues with it at all, really. I got out of storage from about 6 months ago, and I needed to recalibrate it again, but other than that, it's right as rain. It's just working as well as it ever did.
Yeah. So, just describe the architecture of it.
It's similar to. I mean, I suppose the closest comparison is the ARP Odyssey in a lot of ways, but it does have a few tricks up its sleeves that make it unique. But it's a 2 VCO synthesizer. It has a single 24 decibel low pass filter. It has a noise generator. It has an LFO, 2 envelopes, an ADSR and an AR, and it also has, which is kind of the big thing and one of the reasons it got compared to the Odyssey, it has a duophonic mode as well. So it's your basic 2 VCO monosynth, but it does have a few interesting quirks. It's got oscillator cross mod, and it's got looping envelopes, a bit like the Polivoks. So it's got a few features that the Mini Moog doesn't have, and the ARP Odyssey doesn't have. And it's got hard sync as well, because I know hang on. The Mini Moog does have hard sync, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I don't think the Odyssey does. I could be wrong.
You can do sync on the Odyssey. I don't know.
Oh, can you?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I think. You
can. Okay,
yeah,
right.
Because
yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I've done that on the Korg virtual one. I've not got a real one, so.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I need to check that, but yeah. So because obviously the Polyvoks didn't have sync, but it's got hard sync, and yeah. I mean, yeah, it's in a lot of respects, it's quite it's similar to its kind of contemporaries, but it's got its own kind. Again, it's got its own kind of look and its own kind of vibe that is very much the Cat as well.
Yeah. So you got it set up there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So can we have a listen to some of the sounds on it?
Okay, so this is the Octave Cat here. I've got a kind of wee kind of growly resonant bass set up with just a slight release. So that gives you an idea of the kind of growly tone. But as you can see here, it's laid out pretty logically. You've got your envelopes here on the left, and then it follows VCO1, VCO2 into your filter, your low pass filter, and then into your VCA at the end. And it's a nice combination of sliders, knobs, and switches to change the various different things. So yeah, if I look over here at the left at the envelope section, you'll see this is the ADSR repeat that I was talking about. So if I put that on gated and I hold a note down, it should repeat the envelopes. And if I start changing the yeah, I thought that would speed that up. Is it related to the LFO frequency? Okay. Yeah, so in actual fact, yeah, so in the Polyvoks we looked at, the repeat was you could control it by adjusting the attack and decay. This is actually synced to the LFO. So basically, it re-triggers the envelopes, along with for every cycle of the LFO. There's also an auto. I don't know if that might change it though. Yeah. So again, it's still following the LFO. So effectively, you can get the envelopes to sync to the LFO, which is quite a nice feature. Sample and hold, you've got two sources. You can use the noise generator or VCO1, so it can give you slightly different results for that. There's also an LFO delay as well. So again, if I've got this on gated, you should hear that the repeat should hopefully fade in. Oh yeah, it's doing it now, sorry. The rate's quite low. So hang on. Right, now that must just affect it for other things then. So that must be more for if you're using it to, modulate different things. But it does definitely work, the LFO delay, for things like vibrato and things like that. You've also got here underneath, it's the performance section now. It's not really great for, performance controls. That's one of the cat's kind of downsides. You've got a pitch bend that goes from +1 to -1 octaves. So just take that off the repeat, the filter a bit. And it's got a slight dead zone in the middle, so I suppose if if you're quite dexterous, you could probably use that for a bit of pitch bending, but it's not the best. You've also got an octave shift, which is minus or +2, so for quick octave changes, that's quite good. You've got a glide. Now the glide, actually at low settings, it really starts to have quite a long glide, even at lower settings. But even like here. So yeah. So the max setting, I mean, you're getting quite a long, glide up and down. So yeah, so it really does have quite a big range for that there. And then obviously, I showed you earlier on, you've got your LFO frequency. Now, the original Cat didn't have an LED for that, but oh yeah, I should have said, sorry, I should have said this in the kind of preamble. There's a few revisions of the Cat. This is the SRM, which stands for Series Revision Model, which is not a very interesting acronym. So this is the SRM1, and there's also an SRM2, and there is the original Cat. And obviously, you can go and look up the differences, but the main differences are the original Cat had a different filter. It was completely discrete, as far as I'm aware. So it had a discrete filter, discrete oscillators, and it was missing some features, like it didn't have the LFO frequency, LED, the interfacing, options and stuff at the back weren't quite as advanced. But for the most part, it was as fully featured as the later versions. This is the SRM1. So the changes here are, again, you've got the wee LED there, but the biggest change is it has an SSM filter. So it's got, I think it's an SSM 2030. And I personally really love the sound of the SSM filters because, as I said in the last video, my favourite polysynth is the Poly6, and it's got SSM filters in it as well. So I think that's one of the reasons why I really like the Cat, is because I think it's got a really, really nice filter. The SRM2, it basically kept the filter, but it changed the oscillators to oscillators on a microchip. So they weren't discrete, they're chem chips. And also, it used a digital keybed. So this design here, it basically uses voltages. So it's like two control voltages, one for each oscillator. Whereas the SRM2 went to a completely digital circuit that basically tracked what the keyboard was doing. So again, a different design. Probably in the short term more reliable. And less fluctuations when you're moving between notes, because if the contacts are dirty, you can sometimes get that with this. But obviously, if the circuit breaks, then it's going to be a bit of a bear to fix, because it's not all analog parts. But yeah, those are the basic differences. And the obviously the appearance of them was a wee bit different as well. So some of them had like all white caps, some had like kind of silver caps, some had some red caps. There seems to be a kind of mixture depending on what model. Slight the differences in the appearance. So yeah, so as I said, this is the SRM1. That was a performance section. We'll look at our oscillator sections. So we've got here frequency, a fine and a coarse for our VCO1. So if I'll just turn down VCO2 just so you can hear VCO1 by itself, and I'll turn the glide down as well. Okay, so nice simple note there, and so kind of big control for the coarse, and then fine adjustments, pretty straightforward. You've got your other options as well, which I'll come back to. So keyboard off means that it'll just, it will trigger the oscillator. Well, it triggers the VCA when you press a key, but basically the pitch of the oscillator is not controlled by the keyboard. So effectively, you could use this as another LFO, because you can also disable the audio for VCO1 completely. So the main reason you would use that is either for a drone, or if you wanted to use it as a second LFO, for more modulation. And then the poly section we'll come to. That's kind of the duophonic thing. So I'm going to leave it in mono. You've got now the way it kind of works is you've effectively got knobs to add modulation. And you've got one that's basically your LFO and one that's envelopes or VCO2. And then you do have a pulse width control as well for your pulse wave, which can either just be preset to a static setting, or you can use the LFO. Now the LFO, basically you've got one LFO, and obviously you can change the rate, but you can have different shapes doing different things depending on what you've got that switch to. So for example, if I leave it on the sine, I get the classic kind of siren sound, but if I set it to square, I get it going between those states. And then if I want to engage sample and hold, and I've got the two sources there. Some classic sample and hold, yeah. So it's quite flexible in that sense. I mean, you can't get everything to modulate everything else, like a specific way, but you've got enough scope there, I think, between the different settings to get it to do a lot of the stuff that you want it to do. And then this is just the envelope. So you've got your ADSR, your AR, or you can cross mod. So I can use VCO to modulate VCO1 for some frequency modulation. So yeah. Now the other cool thing as well, you've noticed down here, is we've got mixable waveforms. So this is something that the Minimoog and the Odyssey and the Polyvoks don't have. You can set different waveforms, but this has got fully mixables. So you can, that does give you access to, a few different tones. It's not going to give you wildly different tones, but if you want to say you want a hollow sound, like with a square wave, but you want to add like maybe a wee bit of even harmonics. Oh, stop, get the sample turned on. Sorry. I can bring in a bit of sawtooth to get the body of the square, but just with a wee bit extra buzz from the sawtooth. And if I want a bit more fundamentals, I can bring in the triangle wave as well. The other really cool thing is both oscillators have sub-oscillators as well, so you can get some really, really, really fat sounds out of it. So when you combine them with the two oscillators, you can get some really, really big sounds. So yeah, that's basically a VCO1, or pulse width as well. Sorry, so just adjust that. You just turn that, and you can have it set to the LFO. Yeah, or you can have direct, where you can just do it manually. So I can. It gets pretty thin. It doesn't go to the point where it cuts out completely, but it gets fairly thin, you know, for a pulse wave. So so yeah. So and then the VCO two is really much the same. Just less controls. You've got just a fine tune, you know, no coarse tune, because you generally tune it against VCO one, and you have the option to basically modulate it with VCO one, so they can cross modulate each other. You know, so for example, if I've set that to this, you know, I can get them hopefully to. Yeah, you can turn that up and get some quite nice metallic sounds. Which is, yeah, I mean, not every kind of mono synth can get metallic tones like that. I mean, it's not quite ring modulation, but you know, yeah, so that you can get some quite interesting sounds with that as well. And then, yeah, again, you've got less controls here for the waveforms. You've got your sub, you've got your square, you've got your sawtooth. You've not got any pulse width, and you don't have a triangle in that. But yeah, with the two combined, you've got quite a lot of options. And then, you know, we move over here to the VCF section. So again, you could turn VCO 1 off if you want to use it just as an LFO. You've got fully variable keyboard control for the filter, so you know you can obviously, as you go up the keyboard, you can increase the cutoff frequency to compensate, so the higher notes don't sound as dull, you know. And that can also be used with self-oscillation to let you basically play the filter as well. So I could probably maybe demonstrate that later. And then yeah, you've got your modulation here. So again, you can modulate the filter with. I'm just going to turn these back. You can modulate it with the LFO and just with your envelopes. So turn these down, and again, if I'll try and modulate the filter with the... So that's with the LFO on a sine, square, sample and hold. Which doesn't seem to be as pronounced as the other ones. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So you can hear it kind of doing its thing there. And then again, you can actually modulate it with VCO1 as well. So maybe just going to try that. So obviously these are just your envelopes, so you know that's kind of standard fare. But if I try VCO1, right, okay. Now, I mean that almost is kind of a bit of a ring modulator sound, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, so that gets you kind of close to that, you know, by modulating the filter with, you know, an audio rate oscillator. And then down here, you've got your frequency, and your Q is your resonance. So it self-oscillates, you know, it's not as, it's actually got quite, you know, it's not a particularly harsh sounding filter, I would say. It's quite a smooth one, you know, and it will self-oscillate, but... Oh, hang on, I'll change these. That'll do. Okay, so just soup the filter for you. So quite smooth. I crank the resonance up. So you're getting it's almost the complete opposite of the Polyvoks, where when you self-oscillates, it wavers about, and you know, you're getting all these different pitches. This, you're getting a nice, solid, stable pitch. You know, there's no fluctuations there, you know, so it's actually pretty stable in that sense, you know. And then obviously if I crank that more, it probably will start to... So it's not really distorting, you know. It's when I suit that filter, it's not distorting. It's keeping it. It's nice. I wouldn't say it's like, you know, like really clean, and you know, it's not clinical, but it's quite refined, you know. So this is it's quite a nice contrast to the Polyvoks. You know, this is a lot cleaner, a lot kind of, you know, it's a lot smoother, you know, than the kind of rough sound of the Polyvoks filter, you know. And then over here, you've got your VCA, and not really much going on. You can use either envelope to control the VSA. If you put it in bypass, then it just basically the VCA is always open, you know. So again, if you want to just get to play a note, you know, like drone a note, then you can use the bypass there for that. And then finally here, you've got a white noise generator. So, you know, if I just mix in. That's it. Yeah. So those are the kind of the main features of the the Octave Cat. You've got hard sync as well, so I could maybe just show you that quickly. You know, and this is really just a demonstration of the features, you know, more than the sounds. But if I use, say, I'll just use the envelope, yeah, to modulate it first. I want to be modulating this one here, and then I'll start to hear the sync sounds. So if I try the envelope now, there we go. Yeah, so see if you know the kind of classic Van Halen. Yeah, it's that kind of. You can obviously increase the amount of the envelope to get more, you know, kind of more pronounced. So it's got nice hard sync sound. You know, you can use the LFO as well if you want it to get a bit of movement on it. I'm just gonna see because that's also seems to be affecting something else that's causing the pitch. There you go. Or you can have it. So you get that kind of hard sync kind of you know. Like, you know, going between two states with that. Yeah, so it's got a nice hard sync sound. And then, yeah, as I said, there's the Duophonic as well. So if I just switch this here, I'm just going to take this down and just get a kind of basic sawtooth, maybe with some subs. Yeah, I really should have probably introduced the subs. So again, this is it without the subs. So with the subs. Yeah. I can try detune them against each other. Yeah. I'll still get sync on, that's why. So yeah, nice big sounds there. But if I put it on the Duophonic modes, you know, we should have hopefully some. So yeah,
classic.
And the cool thing as well is, so this is sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just saying it's classic sound that.
Yeah, so it's really nice for that. Just those kind of, you know, like honestly, almost like the kind of power chords, you know, like the, you know, like the safety dance kind of sound. But the other cool thing about it is the way it's been designed is if you let go of a key, usually I think in the Odyssey, maybe not the Odyssey, but basically it would usually jump back to if you play one key, they both play the same pitch. If you play another key, then one oscillator will basically take that key, right? But if you let go of that key, usually it would jump back to the original note, and it would sort of join the original note. This doesn't do that. So if I let go of a key, that second oscillator won't trigger again till I play another note. You know, so it's not going to kind of move back to. So if I do that there and let go of that, it's still, even though I've let go of the key, it's still holding that high note. Yeah, you can hear that there. Yeah, so that's quite nice for playing because you don't get all this kind of lopsided when it's kind of moving around. If you let go of a key too early, it kind of lets the note sustain, you know, which was kind of one of their, I think that was kind of one of the part of their patent, you know. So maybe that's why, you know, ARP felt that they'd infringed on something because it was the Duophonic design they'd used. So they were threatened with a lawsuit at the time by ARP. Probably should have mentioned that, but it ultimately came to nothing because I think they were able to prove that the design for their Duophonic keyboard predated theirs. So, you know, in fact, I think there's an interview on YouTube with Carmine, the creator, where he talks about the whole, you know, ARP, lawsuit and everything, and he goes into a bit of detail about it. But yeah, suffice to say, you know, they weren't actually sued; they were just kind of threatened by ARP, you know, which is quite ironic given that, you know, ARP were threatened by Moog for copying their filter, you know. So it swings and roundabouts, I guess. But yeah, so the duophonic mode's quite nice. The only issue is that because some of the contacts are a bit dirty up the top, you sometimes get the pitches moving around. Yeah, you can hear it there. It's actually working quite well for once. Maybe if I put this up. Ah, there you hear it. Do you hear that? So that particular note, yeah, so I'd need to basically just clean the rail a bit better, I think, to sort that. So it's more prone to you're getting wee fluctuations there when you're using it in duophonic mode. When you do it in mono mode, that doesn't really tend to happen as much because it only uses the one rail instead of splitting it. So the actual design of the keyboard, if you open it up, basically there's effectively two rails, yeah, for one for each pitch, and then when you put it in duophonic mode, if you play a high key, it then basically takes it from that rail and not the original rail. So obviously you need to have them both clean for it to work really well. So yeah, so that's the duophonic. The other thing I can show, which is quite a nice trick, is getting it to self-oscillate and play the filter, I did say. So if I basically just turn down all my oscillators, so I should have nothing there, yeah. But if I crank the resonance, because there's just enough noise floor there, I can get a note out of that. And then if I use the keyboard control, I should be able to get it to a setting where I can actually play like a scale. In fact, I'll go for octaves. Not quite. Oh, I think you should put it at the highest setting. There you go. So yeah, so I'm playing the filter, and in that way, if I want to, introduce vibrato, then if I modulate the filter, not the oscillator, I'll get vibrato. So if you want a really clean sine wave, yeah, like a sine wave lead, then you can just, you don't even need to bother like, using a triangle and filtering it down. You can just get it to effectively generate a sine wave with the filter, and then play that. And then the glide will still work for that because I don't know how that works because it's controlling the pitch, not the. Oh yeah, because the pitch is controlled. Yeah, so the pitch is controlling with the keyboard control. There's an interaction there that basically means that your glide will still work, even though technically you're not controlling the oscillator. You're controlling the filter. So if you want to like make kind of theremin style sounds, then you can, which is quite nice as well. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the main features of the Cat, and as I said, it's pretty versatile for what it is, and I think there's enough differences between it and the ARP and the Mini Moog to make it its own thing, and the fact it's very kind of clean, and I don't mean like definitely not clinical, but it's just a very musical sounding synth as well with that filter. It's not it's not distorting, and it's just nice and smooth. So it's out of all the mono synths I own, this is probably my favorite, just because it's a bit quirky, and it's really difficult to make it sound bad. It's just got a giant sweet spot, I find. So, and then the resonance as well. See if I can get a nice kind of, just a kind of nice, maybe big fat bass sound. So, well, take the glide down and maybe go down 2 octaves. Oh, hang on. Mono helps. The thing is, you have to tune them again. So when you go between mono and poly, they go slightly out from each other. So sing a bit.
Sounds useful.
Yeah, still quite, quite crisp, quite clean, but still sounds really good.
It was really interesting. Yeah, you're right. It has it's got that 80 or late 70s mono synth sound. I think, but like you said, it's not so much you could probably, like you said, you couldn't. It does fit into the mix really well, but I can kind of hear it in some. And maybe it was just the sounds coming through. It had that feel that I would get out of some very early 80s synth pop, or even pre synth pop, that kind of sound. But yeah, it is interesting, and the Duophonic is great. Duophonic synths work so well on monosynths like that. It's a different playing technique, but they sound great.
Yeah, I mean the Duophonic on it's really versatile and it works really really well. And as I said, because it doesn't do that thing where actually sorry, maybe we should turn this light off. That's probably a bit better. Sorry, I'm a wee bit overexposed there. Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. Apart from that, as I said, because I've got the earlier one, just making sure that the rails are kind of clean, so otherwise you get the kind of fluctuations with the pitch sometimes. But other than that, it works really well, and it's just a nice thing to have. It means if you want to play, a chord, or you want to like play a bit of lead over a bass drone, you can just do that at the flip of a switch.
And of course, the Behringer have recreated that. I don't know if you've seen that. There's a little Behringer one.
They have, yeah. So the Cat is one that they have recreated. I don't know how close it is to the original, but given that, to be quite honest, given a lot of their other gear, it probably will get you really close, I would imagine. So for anybody who obviously wants, to get a bit of the cat action, so to speak, that is a good option, because obviously no one else is making it at the moment. So it's nice that that's one that they've decided to recreate, and probably the reason is because it is one that is quite quirky. So if someone, they don't just want a Model D, or they don't just want the ARP Odyssey, they might be like, well, I just want something a wee bit different, then you've got things like the Wasp, and then the Cat, so you've got other options there, which is nice.
And I think there's also a Cherry Audio software version of it as well.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, they've got a soft synth version of it as well. So if you want it in software form, that's a good option too. So it's nice to see that it's got some representation, And what you're probably saying about bands using it in the early 80s, it very much might have been the case that bands at the time who couldn't get a hold of a Mini Moog or an Odyssey would have picked up something like a Cat, as a kind of just, if they needed that sound, and it's something that I imagine at the time would have been more affordable. I know the original Cat was only about $400, which at the time would have been really cheap, I would imagine, compared to the competition.
I think OMD. I know OMD had one. I'm not sure it was, but yeah, it's just got that sort of that sound of that really strong analog mono synth. You get those pieces when you get the sub oscillators on there as well, and the sync sounds, everything sounds really great. But it's like I said at the start, it's a synth I don't know that much about, and I think it's great, and I think it fits nicely with your collection, your Polyvoks. And so these quirky, you seem to go for the quirky sort of analog synths, which is great.
Yeah, I've got a couple. I've got my Moog Little Fatty, that I picked up a while ago. So, I've got that's my my Moog sound, and I have I've actually got a Monopoly as well. which I actually traded that. So it was I got that in a trade. I had a pristine Roland JD 800 at the time, and I was offered a trade for a monopoly, and I was kind of on the fence because I thought, the JD 800 is something quite different. I've already got some analog monosynths. Should I go for it? And I was like, well, because it was in really good condition as well, the monopoly. So yeah, I basically took them up in the trade, and to be honest, probably was a good trade, because even though the JD 800 was mint, the value of the monopoly has crept up, so at any point if I wanted, I could sell it and probably get another JD 800. But the other thing as well is the dreaded glue issue that a lot of them get. So obviously that when I had it, it was okay. It didn't really suffer from that. Although I think the aftertouch was pretty much almost gone, because that's another kind of common problem. But we're getting to a stage now where a lot of them, they're getting that black residue with the glue with the sliders, and if you don't clean it, and sort it, by this stage, then I think it's a nightmare to get in there and clean it all out. So it was probably a bit of a ticking time bomb in that sense, unless I'd paid to or got it, maintained. So, but yeah, so I've got some of the ones from the better known manufacturers like Moog and Korg, but I've also got a few quirky ones as well. A nice wee variety.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for showing us the Cat. I really enjoyed that. It's great sounding synth. And hopefully we managed to keep the audio. We had some fun with the teams recording and get the audio. So hopefully in the mix it sounds great. But I really enjoyed chatting to you again, James. And thanks for showing us that.
No, you're more than welcome, Ian, anytime.
Thanks to James. We'll be back same time, same place next week. You can email me, ian@digitalifestyle.com. I'll see you then.